Sunlight streamed through lacy curtains as Marjorie Loomis settled into her overstuffed armchair with a sigh of contentment. She had only just moved to the charming little town of Pinebloom after retiring from her 30-year teaching career. The quiet streets and familiar chimes of the clock tower soothed her in a way her old city apartment never could. She leafed through that morning's mail, humming to herself as she set aside grocery coupons and a handwritten note from her sister. At the bottom of the pile rested a small, unmarked envelope that carried neither a return address nor a postmark. Curious, she slid a finger under the flap. Out tumbled a single key, tarnished and old, with little vines etched along its bow. Inside the envelope was a scrap of paper, blank except for a faint stain that looked suspiciously like a coffee ring. She peered inside in search of a note or clue but found nothing. Feeling a slight ripple of excitement, Marjorie turned the key over in her hand. The design was undoubtedly vintage, and someone had gone to the trouble of mailing it to her anonymously. While the rest of the day beckoned with the comfortable mundane, unpacking more boxes, organizing her spice cabinet, this small mystery tugged at her curiosity. Perhaps it was a mistake, she thought. Or perhaps it was meant to land in her hands for a reason. After a quick lunch, she headed out to the main thoroughfare, hoping to bump into one of her new neighbors. She wanted to find someone who might know about stray keys that ended up in random mailboxes. Strolling down Hollyhock Lane, she greeted the mail carrier. But he was a new hire, who only shrugged and fiddled with the brim of his cap when she asked about how unmarked letters might arrive. Next, she spotted Agnes Tolliver, Pinebloom's biggest town gossip, tending her front garden. Agnes wore her trademark pink sun hat and waved Marjorie over, always eager for a chat. "Beautiful afternoon, isn't it?" Agnes said, her cheeks rosy from weeding. Then, in a conspiratorial whisper, she continued, "Still settling in, dear?" "I am," Marjorie replied, "though I did receive something peculiar in the mail. An old key in an unmarked envelope." "A key?" Agnes's eyes lit up with curiosity. "No note inside?" "None." Marjorie described its size and shape. "It looks like an antique, maybe for a padlock or a large door." Agnes tapped her finger against her chin. "You might want to ask old Cyrus Eldridge. He's a local handyman and collector of oddities. If anyone would recognize that key, it'd be him. Lives near the orchard. Can't miss his barn with the bright red roof." Thanking Agnes, Marjorie set off toward the orchard on the far side of town. The walk took her along a gravel road, flanked by neat picket fences. She passed a small pond where a trio of ducks floated placidly. Shade from the arching oak trees offered some relief from the late summer sun. At last she spotted the bright red roof of Cyrus Eldridge's barn, which glowed like a beacon against the rows of apple trees. Cyrus himself was easy to find. He was in the barnyard, tinkering with an ancient wheelbarrow. With his silvery beard and broad shoulders, he looked almost too robust for a retiree. Before Marjorie even spoke, he detected her presence and turned around with a warm smile. "Afternoon," he called, waving a greasy wrench in greeting. "Help you with something?" Marjorie produced the key. "I'm new in town. Marjorie Loomis. I was told you're the person to see about old keys. I received this in the mail today, no return address." Cyrus wiped his hands on a rag and held out a calloused palm. Carefully, Marjorie placed the key there. His eyes narrowed as he studied the swirling vine design, the tarnished surface, and the worn edges. Finally, he let out a thoughtful hum. "This is no door key," he said. "Looks like it might fit a lockbox, or maybe a small building's padlock." He pointed to the vine motif. "Seen that symbol lurking around in a few places? Might be something belonging to the old Tisdale family estate. They had a greenhouse that's been closed up for decades. The Tisdales were quite the horticulturists back in the day." Marjorie felt her heart skip at the possibility. "Is that greenhouse nearby? And does it still exist?" He nodded. "Down on the eastern edge of Pinebloom, near the abandoned orchard. Place has been locked up tight ever since old Amelia Tisdale passed. Rumor says she left a cryptic will that nobody could figure out. Weeds have overrun the greenhouse grounds, or so I've heard. Never did go there myself. But you might wander down the orchard path until you see a tall iron gate. Think there's a greenhouse behind that? Thanking him, Marjorie carefully pocketed the key. Her afternoon suddenly had a new purpose. She crossed a field until she reached a rusted iron fence shrouded in vines. Sure enough, on the gate was a tarnished padlock bearing a faint floral pattern. She pressed the key into the padlock, and with an audible click, it turned perfectly. The iron gate swung open, squeaking in protest. The path beyond was choked with creeping ivy and fallen leaves. Twigs snapped beneath her sneakers as she maneuvered deeper into the property. The greenhouse rose up in the distance, its glass panels dusty and half covered with moss. Parts of the roof looked cracked, and thick ivy draped over the sides like a heavy curtain. Still, it retained an air of grandeur, a testament to the once thriving gardens that had lightly rivaled any in town. Marjorie tested the door. It stuck, but after a gentle shove, it opened with a groan. Inside, the air was warm and stagnant. The glass ceiling let in dappled sunlight, illuminating a riot of overgrown plants that spilled out of every corner. In one spot, a tall fern threatened to break through a side window, while a tangle of flowering vines curled around empty plant stands. Wanda, the Tisdales' long-time gardener, if she ever existed, was long gone. Marjorie took slow, careful steps, not wanting to disturb anything. Broken pots and shards of terracotta littered the floor, but amid the chaos, she spotted a table pushed against the far wall. On it sat a series of old journals and a scattering of gardening tools. The journals caught her eye immediately, a potential trove of secrets. Ghosting her fingers over the faded covers, she picked one up and realized the spine was embossed with a single initial, A. Carefully, she opened to a random page. June 12th. The seeds arrived, but not all are what I ordered. A strange variety labelled only MB was included. Unsure if they are dangerous or simply mislabeled. Will keep separate for now. Curiosity sparked, and she flipped to a later entry. July 1st. The MB seeds have sprouted an unusual vine that leaves a fine soot on my fingertips. Could this be the same species rumored to be grown across the pond? Further testing is needed. But I'm concerned about the spread. Marjorie skimmed a few more entries, each detailing experiments with exotic plants. Some references even hinted at secret horticultural societies. She set the journal aside, eager to examine the next one, when a voice startled her from behind. "Hey! You're not supposed to be in here!" came a firm, though not unkind call. Heart thudding, Marjorie whirled around to see a petite woman with short brown hair. She wore a green vest embroidered with the Pinebloom Community Council insignia. Her wide-eyed expression reflected shock and curiosity more than anger. "I'm sorry," Marjorie said, putting a hand to her chest. "The gate was locked, but I had a key." She quickly explained the mysterious envelope, the key, and her conversation with Cyrus Eldridge. The woman exhaled and shook her head. "Well, this is the Tisdale greenhouse. Technically property of the town now, though nobody's touched it in years. My name is Brenna Mallory. I work for the council. We sometimes get calls about trespassers here, but it's usually just curious kids." Marjorie moved aside to let Brenna see the dusty journals. She pointed at the scrawled notes about exotic seeds. "I'm trying to figure out why someone wanted me to come here. Do you know anything about the Tisdales?" Brenna let out a soft laugh. "Growing up, I heard plenty of stories. Amelia Tisdale was known for her rare plant collection, some rumoured to have medicinal or even mystical properties. Others said she was just an eccentric recluse, but the greenhouse has been locked since her passing about 2 decades ago. No one in town seemed to want to claim any inheritance, or maybe they couldn't make sense of her will." "Aye," Marjorie chewed her lip. "Would you mind if I looked around a bit more? I'd like to see if anything in these journals explains who sent me the key." "Sure, I'll keep watch." Brenna said, crossing her arms. I'm curious now too. Encouraged, Marjorie delved deeper into the journals. She found drawings of plants with spiked leaves and notes describing bizarre growth patterns. One passage stood out. August 14th. The greenhouse is now home to my prized ebony dawn orchid, a species rumoured extinct. I keep it locked away in the eastern corner, fueled by the soil mixture from the MB seeds. I suspect it has properties beyond our realm of scientific understanding. Much caution required. Ebony dawn orchid, Marjorie read aloud. Never heard of it. Brenna's eyes flickered with curiosity. That's the corner where the vines look the thickest. Maybe we can see if that orchid is still alive. Stepping carefully past scattered plant debris, they reached the eastern corner. A chaotic nest of vines towered overhead. Indeed, it appeared to be growing from a set of sturdy crates and covered glass enclosures. With Brenna's help, Marjorie pried away a curtain of clinging ivy. Hidden behind it all was a large glass case, its door sealed shut. Inside, beneath thick layers of dust, they could make out the outline of an orchid-like plant. Its dark, wilting petals drooped, yet something about its shape still radiated a strange beauty. Gently wiping dust from the case, Marjorie tried the door. It was locked, as Amelia Tisdale's journal had indicated. The lock here, too, had the same vine pattern as on the key. She held her breath and slipped the key into the small padlock. It fit. Another turn, another click, and the door swung open. A stale wave of warm, herby air rushed out. The ebony dawn orchid, or what remained of it, was in a pot partially filled with a dark, crumbly soil. The plant looked on the verge of collapsing under its own weight, but near the base, tiny buds suggested life still pulsed through its veins. Brenna reached in to touch it, but Marjorie stopped her. Careful, she said, recalling Amelia's warnings in the journal. We don't know if it's toxic. Taking a moment to fetch some gloves from a nearby box, Marjorie gingerly prodded the soil. It felt strangely light, as though laced with ash. The faint scent of something fern-like rose from it. She gently swirled her finger around the surface, uncovering a small object. A metal tag. Its inscription partially corroded. Turning it over, she made out a few letters. M.B. Ebony D. A plaque of sorts, used by Amelia for labelling, perhaps. Something must have been special about this plant, Brenna mused. Could it be an experimental hybrid? Pinebloom is known for its mild climate, but I've never heard of an orchid like this in any horticultural circles. Marjorie shrugged, slipping the tag into her pocket for safekeeping. I think we should take Amelia's journals to someone who knows specialized plants. Maybe there's an explanation in these pages for why it was so important, and who might want them rediscovered. Brenna agreed, suggesting they lock up and head back to her office at the town hall, where she had some reference materials. They carefully closed the greenhouse door, replaced the padlock on the glass case, and exited the greenhouse. Marjorie pocketed the key again, ensuring it wouldn't get lost. As they walked back through the orchard path, Marjorie's mind buzzed with questions. The ebony dawn orchid, the cryptic references to MB seeds, and this mysterious key pointed to a hidden legacy. Somewhere in Pinebloom, someone knew more than they were letting on. After all, the envelope had no postmark, meaning it was likely hand-delivered. They arrived at the modest town hall, a white clapboard building with tall windows. Brenna led the way to her small office, stacked ceiling-high with files and town records. She flipped on a desk lamp, casting a warm glow over the cluttered space, and removed her vest. Let's see if we have any records about Amelia's greenhouse, she said, rummaging through a tall metal filing cabinet. Marjorie set the journals down on the desk and watched as Brenna produced a thick binder labelled Tisdale Estate in faded marker. Inside were newspaper clippings, property deeds, photos of the greenhouse in its prime, and a copy of Amelia's will. The will, in swirling script, left my horticultural estate to Pinebloom, but with a curious postscript. Those who hold the vine-edged key shall bear guardianship of my ebony dawn. Turning a page, Marjorie read it again to be sure. Those who hold the vine-edged key. So Amelia intended for someone to continue her work. Brenner's eyebrows rose. But the town never followed up properly. Nobody here had a key, so the property sat neglected. Maybe Amelia's will demanded a caretaker who would actively take on the challenge, or it would remain locked up. That caretaker seems to be you, Marjorie. At that moment, a soft knock on the office door drew their attention. Cyrus Eldridge stepped in, cap in hand. His face held an apologetic look. Saw you two walking here with those journals. Figured you might need me. Agnes told me about the Tisdale greenhouse. Marjorie beckoned him in. We've been piecing together the story. Looks like Amelia Tisdale wanted to pass the orchid along to whomever ended up with this key, but I still have no idea who slipped it into my mail. Cyrus nodded gravely. I might have a clue. I remember a rumor about a horticultural society up in the next county. They visited Amelia's greenhouse decades ago. Could be someone from that group quietly watching from afar, waiting for the right person to come along. But if that's the case, they might have an interest in the ebony dawn. Maybe they want it cultivated, or... He paused. Or they want it for themselves. Marjorie's eyes widened. Think they might come looking for it? Cyrus shrugged but looked worried. That orchid could be worth a fortune if it truly is the rumored species. Exotic plant collectors will pay handsomely for a rare bloom. Anxious to protect Amelia's legacy, and concerned that the orchid might fall into unscrupulous hands, Marjorie, Brenner and Cyrus agreed they needed to keep the greenhouse locked and the location of the orchid under wraps. But they also needed advice from a horticulture expert to revive it properly. A plan formed. Brenner remembered an old friend, Dr. Helena Fields, a botany professor at the local college. If anyone could help care for an endangered orchid, Helena could. That evening, they placed a call to Dr. Fields, who agreed to come to Pinebloom the next day to inspect the plant. Early the following morning, Marjorie arrived back at the greenhouse, meeting Brenner, Cyrus, and Dr. Fields at the gate. The professor was a tall, bespectacled woman with a calm demeanor. She carried a canvas bag of specialized tools, small vials, and a notepad. The group unlocked the greenhouse, guiding Helena to the east corner. She let out an audible gasp upon unveiling the ebony dawn. Incredible, she breathed, carefully examining the withered petals and the sooty soil. I've read about the ebony dawn in obscure journals, but I never dreamed I'd see one. This species was rumored extinct. She explained that it required a highly specific environment, consistently warm temperatures, careful watering, and mineral-rich soil. Helena tested the soil, jotting notes about its composition. There's an unusual substance here, she said, possibly volcanic ash. That might explain the sooty residue Amelia wrote about. All the while, Marjorie couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Perhaps it was simply the many glass panels, or the odd hush inside. At any moment, she half expected someone else to appear at the door, attracted by the unusual gatherings in an abandoned greenhouse. When Helena finished her survey, she recommended transferring the plant to a specialized greenhouse environment, somewhere with controlled humidity. However, the Tisdale greenhouse itself might suffice if they repaired the cracked roof and renewed the ventilation system. Marjorie exchanged glances with Brenner, who immediately suggested applying for a community grant to restore the greenhouse. It'd be a lovely addition to Pinebloom if done right, she said. Before they left, Dr. Fields carefully collected a few soil samples. Then Cyrus relocked the glass case. As they stepped back outside, the fresh air felt like an awakening after the musty warmth within. Marjorie realized she'd been holding her breath for much of the visit. 2 days later, Pinebloom buzzed with rumors that the greenhouse might be restored. At the local cafe, residents sipped cappuccinos and speculated about exotic plants, potential tours, and the sudden flurry of activity on the old Tisdale property. Marjorie hoped the renewed attention wouldn't bring trouble. As if reading her thoughts, Agnes caught her by the elbow while she ordered a cup of tea. "He heard you're the new caretaker of that mysterious greenhouse," she said. "All kinds of talk swirling around. Beware of strangers sniffing around your place." Agnes's words proved eerily prophetic. That evening, after dark, Marjorie thought she heard footsteps on her front porch. By the time she opened the door, no one was there. The next morning, her mailbox stood ajar, though there was no new mail inside. If someone were trying to intimidate her or stake out the greenhouse key, they certainly hinted at it. Determined not to let fear stop her, Marjorie asked Brenner to accompany her back to the greenhouse. They wanted to do a little cleaning and see if there were more notes or journals tucked in corners. As they arrived, they once again found the gate securely locked, no sign of tampering. Entering the greenhouse, they carefully organized the broken pots and finally wiped layers of dust from the glass panels. In their explorations, they discovered another notebook tucked in a far corner. This one was older and water-damaged. Its entries began some years before Amelia's death. One passage read, "I fear my rare ebony dawn has attracted the wrong attention. A man claiming to be part of a horticultural society visited, but I sense his interest isn't purely academic. I must ensure that if something happens to me, only a worthy soul finds the key." Marjorie looked up, meeting Brenner's alarmed gaze. "So that's why the envelope came anonymously. Amelia must have arranged for someone to deliver it when the time was right. Or maybe that society is still poking around," Brenner added quietly. They packed up the notebook and were about to leave when a sudden noise from outside froze them in place. Footsteps on the gravel. Exchanging a tense glance, they stepped toward the greenhouse door. Through a gap in the vines, they saw a figure in a dark jacket standing at the gate, fiddling with the lock. Marjorie's heart pounded in her chest. She and Brenner crouched behind a tangled cluster of overgrown plants. Whoever it was, they seemed determined to break in. The padlock rattled, then a frustrated grunt. After a minute, the figure gave up and turned away, disappearing down the orchard path. Brenner let out a shaky breath. "We need to call Cyrus and the local police. That figure could be connected to the old society. We can't act like this is just idle curiosity anymore." Reluctantly, Marjorie nodded. She wanted to remain calm and cozy in her new retirement, not dealing with potential criminals. The Ebony Dawn and Tisdale greenhouse had fallen under her care. She couldn't simply walk away. The police arrived within the hour, and Marjorie and Brenner recounted what they saw. Though there wasn't much for them to act on, no physical evidence, no description beyond a dark jacket, the officers promised extra patrols at night. Meanwhile, Cyrus agreed to reinforce the greenhouse's gate and replace the small padlock with a heavier one. He hammered a sign reading, "Town property, no unauthorized entry," onto the iron bars. Dr. Fields called later that week to share her soil analysis. "There's a unique mineral composition that's found in only a few places in the region," she said. "My guess is Amelia Tisdale brought in specialized soil from a hot spring area for the orchid. If we replicate those conditions in the greenhouse, we might revive the Ebony Dawn." With the help of a town grant, work on the greenhouse's restoration began in earnest. Community volunteers cleared away the ivy, broken glass panes were discarded and replaced. The floors got swept, the structure reinforced. Dr. Fields supervised the replanting of the Ebony Dawn in fresh, nutrient-rich soil, ensuring it kept its special blend of volcanic ash. Day by day, the orchid perked up, its leaves regaining a gentle sheen, and one bud looking dangerously close to blooming. During all of this, Marjorie and the rest remained vigilant. The figure in the dark jacket never reappeared, at least not visibly. Perhaps the increased police presence deterred any further mischief, or perhaps the mysterious horticultural society had seen enough to realize the orchid was in safe hands. Marjorie suspected a little of both. As the renovations neared completion, the greenhouse took on new life. Vibrant sunbeams once again sparkled through clean glass, illuminating rows of fresh seedlings. Pinebloom residents strolled along the orchard path, drawn by curiosity, peeking in to admire the progress. It transformed from a haunted relic into a blossoming sanctuary. At last, the orchid's first bud opened. Tiny at first, it gradually unfurled into a deep onyx bloom, marbled with flickers of royal purple. The petals looked almost velvety, shimmering in the afternoon light. A faint, spicy perfume drifted in the air. Residents whispered in awe. The ebony dawn was indeed extraordinary. Dr. Fields carefully documented the flowering, snapping photos and taking notes for an academic paper. Standing by the orchid's glass enclosure, Marjorie felt a wave of gratitude for her unexpected role in this story. She had come to Pinebloom to retire quietly, yet she'd been chosen somehow to continue Amelia Tisdale's legacy. She didn't know if the unknown sender was truly part of that horticultural society or a hidden benefactor who loved Pinebloom as much as Amelia had, but she trusted that the right choice had been made in passing on the key. After the orchid bloomed, Marjorie found a new sense of purpose. She partnered with Brenner to organize tours that would raise money for Pinebloom's local gardens and conservation efforts. People from neighboring towns flocked to see the legendary orchid, hearing whispers of its near extinction and miraculous preservation. Local businesses thrived on the influx of visitors, crafting ebony dawn souvenirs like postcards and small paintings. One mild afternoon, a young woman with wispy auburn hair timidly approached Marjorie. She wore a pin that read Midland Horticultural Society. Her cheeks were flushed. "Miss Loomis," she began softly, "I'm an admirer of Amelia Tisdale's work. My grandmother was in her circle of enthusiasts. She wanted this key to be passed on when the time was right." Marjorie's heart pounded as she realized she was face to face with the messenger at last. The woman smiled gently. "So many folks were clamoring for that orchid, wanting to exploit it. My grandmother held on to the key, refusing to let it fall into the wrong hands. She waited for someone who'd treasure the greenhouse and keep it for the town's enjoyment. When you moved to Pinebloom Avol, all those years educating children, my grandmother knew you'd do the right thing. I delivered the key myself, left it in your mailbox before dawn." Emotion tugged at Marjorie's chest. "Thank you," she said, reaching for the young woman's hand. "You've given me and Pinebloom an incredible gift." The woman stood quietly, gazing at the orchid, which stretched its shadowy petals in a gesture of regal grace. Then she let out a contented sigh. "Amelia would be proud," she murmured. With that she bowed her head and slipped out the greenhouse door, disappearing into the orchard beyond. In the weeks that followed, the greenhouse continued to flourish. Dr. Fields believed the orchid might produce a second bloom if nurtured properly. Cyrus installed better lighting and a new irrigation system. Brenner organized a small festival at the orchard to celebrate Pinebloom's roots in gardening tradition. And Marjorie, in between leading tours for curious children and out-of-towners, often found herself simply sitting among the greenery, reading Amelia's journals, soaking in the warm, earthy air. No further threat emerged, and it seemed that the shadowy visitor had abandoned their efforts or realized they had no claim to the orchid of Pinebloom. Meanwhile, the orchard path became a place of community gatherings rather than whispers of trespassers, and in her snug retirement cottage, Marjorie rested easy each night, a sense of accomplishment and newfound belonging settling over her heart. She would never forget the initial jolt of finding that key in her mailbox, an unspoken invitation to unravel a decades-old mystery. Pinebloom had welcomed her with far more excitement than she ever anticipated, yet it had rewarded her curiosity with a sense of purpose. Instead of the quiet, unremarkable retirement she had planned, she found herself a guardian of something rare and beautiful. Each day she felt Amelia's spirit lingering in the rays of greenhouse sun, urging her to continue nurturing all that was good and green in Pinebloom. And that was just what Marjorie intended to do. Keep the greenhouse thriving, keep the town's history alive, and keep an open heart for the possibilities that might sprout from even the smallest, most mysterious seeds.